佛像出土的汉景帝杨陵博物院的李明院长。李院长您好，现在跟我们的观众朋友们打个招呼吧。
观众朋友们，大家好，我是汉景帝杨陵博物院李明。
李明院长，我们现在身处的是汉景帝杨陵博物院，不如您先给我们简单的来介绍一下博物院吧。
汉景帝杨陵博物院呢是全国重
Tomb
点文
Museum.
保护单位，
It is one of the
国家
national
首
level
批考古遗址公园
protected
国家一级博物馆
relics
4A 级旅游
museums,
景区
and
啊，
it is
是
also a
1999年
4A
建成
level
投入使用
tourist
的
spot.
是我们省内乃至全国的比较有特色的博物馆。
It is also
主
one
要
of the
的
most
是
special
依据
museums in China.
西汉景帝和王皇后
From
的
Western Han
合葬陵园
Dynasty,
汉
Han
阳
Jing
陵
Emperor
建设的一座考古遗址类的博
has
物馆
left behind some
展示的
relics
是
collected
汉景
in
帝
this
杨陵的
museum.
发掘成果和一些
And
珍贵的
we
出土
show the
文物。
archaeological results and some treasurable cultural relics here. And today the theme is about the two gold-plated bronze statues. They are of great significance. Now we are at the entrance of the temporary exhibition hall. Could you please lead us in? Okay.
我们现在呢是就进入到了这两尊佛像的一个展馆当中。
This is the exhibition hall
这个
of
展览
these
的
two
标题呢叫
sculptures.
繁象东城
This
陕西
exhibition
咸阳
is
传尊
themed
东汉
under
金头佛像
Fanyang
特展。之所以
Tomb
叫繁
the
象
special
东城呢，是
exhibition
因为
of
这次
the
出土的两尊金头佛像
gold-plated
呢具有
Buddha
典型的
sculptures
这个
in
箭头罗
Eastern
造型
Han
的风
Dynasty.
格，还是从
You could
中亚
see
地
the
区的
artistic style
佛像发源地传
was
播到我们中
introduced
原地区
from
的。
the origin
是
of
繁象
Buddha
的意思。那么
sculptures.
东城呢，就是说明
And
根据我们的研究
Dongchen
成果，这两尊金头佛像
means
是依据中亚
those
地区
two
的佛像样
statues
本在我们本土制
have
造而成
some
的。
在我们东方铸造
samples
而成的，叫东城。
对，
from
这
the
个意
West,
思啊。
but
那我们再
they
继续
were
往前
made
走。那这个
in
展馆里面呢，应该就
the
会陈列
Eastern
那两
part.
件这个佛像是吧？
对，我们这次是一个特展，只有
This is a
两件展出的
special
文物，就是这两
exhibition
尊金头佛像
with
啊
only
整个
two
展览呢分为
collections.
4个部分。
They
前
are
部
the
分呢主
two
要介绍的
statues.
是
And there are
佛
four
像的
parts of the
出土地
exhibition.
点
In the
啊
first
因为
part,
这
we
个出土的
introduce
地点
about
距
the
离我们
place
汉景帝杨
of
陵博物
the
院所在地非常的
unearthed
近，它是横在
sculptures.
一个圆
It's
上。
very close
这
to
个
where
圆
we
呢
are.
叫咸阳园，大的整个的地名叫咸阳园啊。那么佛像
This
的出土
place
地
is
呢
called
在
Xianyang
当
Yuan.
时是处于这个汉长安城以北，
In the
隔着渭
Chang'an
河相望的
city,
一处高地。
those
那
two
么在后期呢
sculptures
把它叫做
were
水源园或
on
者
the
公路园
opposite side
啊
of
但是
the
在
Weihe River.
在东汉时期呢，
In
这个
Eastern
园
Han
不知道它
Dynasty.
叫什么名字，但是大概可以
We
知道
didn't
它
know
叫
the name
咸
of
阳园
them,
是因为它处于
but we know
秦咸
that
阳
it's
城的西
basically
北
called
啊
Xianyang
所以
Yuan
有可能当时也叫
because
做咸
it's
阳
in
园。
the
那么它
western
距离
side
它
of
最近的
Xianyang
就
city.
是东汉的
And
长安城，也就是西
This
汉的首
place
都
is
长安
very
城。当
close
时
to
东汉还在
Chang'an
研究
city
长安
in
城
Eastern Han
就是
Dynasty.
京城嘛，当时。
That's the
还有一个
capital
城市
city
呢，就
in the
是
Han Dynasties.
它东南方向的汉安陵邑。
Another city called
啊
Anling City on
所
the
以我们推测
southeastern
这个
corner.
这两尊金头佛像的主人呢，有可能是
We believe
汉长安
that
城
the
周边的
owners
居
of
民
the
或
two
者是安
statues
陵城内
might
的这个
have
居
been
民。
living
它是这样的
in
一个
Anling
结构
City
成分
or
啊
in the
推
surroundings
测
of
一下
Chang'an
当时
City.
我们出土的时候的墓主
So
人
that's a
身份。
rough estimate.
这两尊佛
Could
像
you
的出土
please
地
give
点
a
呢，
calculation
是一
about
个我们陕西省
the
内古代
title
墓
of
葬
the
分布
owners?
最为密集的一个区域啊，从
The
战国
place
晚
where
期的
those two
秦开
statues
始
were
一直
found
延续使用到
have
明清，
given
延
birth
续
to
使
a
用
lot
到
of
时间长达
collections
2200
from
年。
Qing,
已
Han
经发掘那么
to
大，
Ming
已
and
经
Qing
超过上万座。
dynasties. Over
各种
2,000
时期
years
的墓
have
葬都有。
passed
那么以
by,
东汉
and over tens
十
of
五国北朝
thousands
隋唐
of
墓葬
relics
为
have
主
been
要特
found.
啊，这个规模比较大，保存数量多，出土文物非常
So
丰
it
富，
has stored
也
a
很精彩。
lot of
所以这个公
cultural
墓园的
relics.
在考古发掘的志上的名气是很大的，可能很多观众
So
朋友
this
们都
place
听
is
说过这
very
个地
well
方。
known in
按您
archaeology.
刚刚的
Maybe
介绍，
our
我们也知
viewers
道
have
就
heard
是这
about
个
it.
出土的这个位
According
置，
to
它
your
的朝代应该也
introduction,
是
the
非常
place where
明
it
晰
was
的，所以
unearthed,
也同时是
the
帮助我
dynasty
们
was
了解它到
clear.
底是哪个朝代的物件。
对，之所以这
So
两尊金
we
头佛像很重
are
要
in
呢，
the
就是
know
因为它
about
是
one
科
those
经过科
two
学的考古
statues
发
were
掘
made.
出土的
Yes,
我们
scientific
目前所说的
archaeology
时代
work
最早的中国
will
时代
give
最
us
早的金
information
头佛像
about
啊。
the years
我们首先来
when
看这
those
个
two
佛像
statues
的
were
这
made,
个一
and
些
we
基本
believe
特
that
征
those two
啊，这是
were
我
the
们做的一
earliest
个佛像
made
的各个部分
Buddha
的
sculptures in
复原
China.
结构。它首先
Now
它
we
是
can
有
see
一
the
个头光
restored
圆形的
structure
头光，
of
这是
this
表示
sculpture.
它
We can see
神的身份的一个重要特征，它是有头光
the
的啊。
round
那么上面
shaped sculpture behind the head. That means the light shining over the Buddha. And we can also see the hand raised up. and the left hand is hanging down, and the feet stood on the foundation. And I believe this Buddha is not wearing shoes. That's called xianzu, meaning barefoot.
所以这个也就是犍陀罗佛像的风格，也帮助我们判断我们这次出土的这两尊佛像
And
的
those
这
are
个
the
风
special
格，就是类似
characteristics
于
of
这样
this
的一个
Buddha
犍陀罗风
sculpture.
对，这个犍陀罗风格
And
就是咱们
those
这次
two
出土的佛像
bronze
里，这个犍陀罗
statues
风
were
格
quite
造像
similar
艺
to
术
this
性
one structure.
形象非常接近啊。
And
那
the
我们来了解
image
一下他
of
们的
our
出土吧。
honors,
我
the
看到前
bronze
面有很多
statues
的
were
这个
very
展示，
similar
你
to
给我们来
this
介绍
one.
一下。
This
我们到
one
那
has
边
a
就
name
现在那
of
边的那个图片
Gandhara
啊。
Buddha.
这个是咸阳成人墓地的一个平面正摄影像图啊。大家可以看到它一共
This is
由南向北分布有
image
8座墓
of
葬，
the
都
Eastern
是
Han family
斜坡
tombs.
墓道的土洞墓，墓葬的方向都一致，都是向东的。
The
向
direction
东的
of
然
the
后墓室
tombs
结构呢，都是就是
was the
就
same
是多是土
towards
洞，
the
单是
east.
土洞，有的个别的墓葬有砖铺地，啊，
Some
典型
have
的
the
东汉
earth, and
时代的
some
家族墓地。啊，为什么说它
had
家族
the
墓地呢？
foundation
因为
of
通
bricks.
过这个平面图可以看到，
That's a
它是
family
很
tomb
很显然，它是
because
一个有
based on
规
this
划的
plain
一个
image,
墓
we
地，对
could
吧？
see
而
the
且使
clear
用的时间
plan
应该
of
在
this
数
tomb.
十年之内，它埋葬了很多的成员。
A lot of
这个
family
是
members
中
have
原
been
地区
buried
不
in the
光是我们
tomb
陕
in
西
Central
河
Plain
南地
area.
区了，其他地区也是一样。
Be
当
it
时就流
Henan
行这
province
种
or the other
家族聚
provinces,
族而葬的
this
这种
type of
合葬的墓地。
family-based
那么每一个墓
tomb
葬呢
was
是一个
very
可能是一个
popular.
家庭的单元，他们每一个墓室埋葬的这个
One
家
family
庭不
member
同辈分的一个成员，而这
was
些不同辈
buried
分的
in
成
one
员
of
就等
such
于是一个
tombs.
家族的成员。这种
They come
聚
from
族而
different
葬的这个
generations, but they belong to the
丧葬
same
形式呢，
family
在
tree.
当时是
Such
有
a
一定社会背
burial
景的，就是说
type
当时
had
东汉
some
晚
social
期呢，
background.
东汉时
In
代
the
呢
end of
非常
Eastern
讲究这
Han
个家族
Dynasty,
实力，他们要通过凝聚
the strength
家
of
族实力
an
来达
entire
到一定的
family
政
was
治目的
valued.
和经济
So
实
they
现
have
一定
some
的经济
political
目的，当时
sense
是
in building up
方
their
言
own
经济
family.
啊，家
And that
族
also
凝聚
helped
在
to
一起
support
才有
the
这个
Central
比
Plain
较大的实
economy.
力啊，才能够达到一定的目的。
Only when the
当时的这
family
个
is
时
very
代特点。
influential
所以这种
could
家族
they
墓
have
地呢，
such a
我们判断
tomb.
它是东汉
That's
晚期
the
的家
special
族墓地
feature
呢，
of
是因为
that time period.
根据它的一
And
个
this
整
tomb
个
was
结构。
believed to be from the end of
对
Eastern
它的
Han
建造来说，
Dynasty
这是非常
because
常
we
见、很
judge
常见的东汉
from
家族
the
墓地。
array
这
of
样
those
这金铜
tombs.
佛像呢，就是出现在这个出土于这个3015号墓的
This
墓
is
室
number
主墓室的西北方向。
3015,
在
and you
在
could
这个
see
拐角这个位置出土，一会儿还有图。
we found our statue from the northwestern corner of the tomb.
家族墓地的这座墓3019号墓呢，出土了一件
3019 gave birth to a pottery,
可以看到，所以这两
and we
件
will see more.
器物呢是整个
Representative of that
这
family
个是
tomb.
3015号墓当时发掘完了之后
Those
的
are
一个
pictures of
清理完成之后的一个情况。那么它虽然被
3015
盗在
tomb.
这个位置，在墓道
Even
的
though
这个墓道的西端，
it was
这个位置
theft,
有一个比较明显
but
的
on the
洞
west
这一
side
块
we
墓
could
道
see
当
the
时
hole
被
where the
被
thieves
盗
went
了
in.
过。金铜佛像呢是出现在这个位置啊。
And this is where
西北
the gold-plated bronze statues were
这是当
found.
时出土
It's
的
over
时候
here.
的照片。
And we
啊
took
出土
this
是什么
photo
样子，
when
我们
we
就把它
excavated it.
拍摄下来，这是我们考古上的一个必经的一个资料提取的过程。
And those materials were
很多
necessary
人
for
说，你们
archaeological
这个
work.
佛像出土在一个被盗扰的
Some
墓葬
people
里，怎么
wonder,
能判定它的
since
时代呢？
this tomb
就是
has
说
been
我们
robbed
第一个
before,
是
how
根
could
据
you
这个盗洞
judge
距离这个
the
佛像出土的位置
time
大概还有3
period
米多远？在
that
佛像
those
出
two
土的这个
statues
情况
belong?
来说，因为佛像当时出土的时候是位于这个
When
墓
the
室的地
Buddha
面之上，
statues
上
were
面有很深
firstly
的这个淤土，没
excavated,
有被扰动过的
they
迹
were
象。
on
所以
top
我们判定这
of
个
the
盗洞虽
floor.
然把墓葬盗扰过之后呢，
Even though
但
the
是可
tomb
能盗洞没
had
有
been
深入
robbed
到这个
before,
地区。再一个很
but
很
the thieves did
很
not
有
go
利的
deep enough
证
to
据就是
find
说，如
those
果
two
是后
Buddha
期人
statues.
携带这2尊金铜佛像
Also,
去盗掘这个
if
墓的
you
话，
suspect
逻辑上说
that
不
those
通。
two
就是
statues
说
were taken
它
in later
盗掘
on
墓
by
葬
the
的目的，它
thieves,
是为了
that's
取得墓
illogical.
葬里面比较有经济价值
The
的这些
thieves
文
hoped
物，
to
对吧？
get some
它不可
very
能携带这么
valuable
贵重的
treasures
东西
from this
去
tomb.
盗
They
墓，而且
could
还把它
never
移动
bring
的，这不是
in
和它的这个
those
动机是
treasurable
相悖的吗？
statues.
对，
That's
从逻辑
contrary
上说
to
不通。
their
所以根据
initial
考古迹
objective.
象和这个逻辑推理来说，我们认为这2件金
So
铜佛
based
像
on those
应
two
该是
reasons, because we believe that those two Buddha statues must be the items buried together with the masters. And we believe that the time period must be about the end of Eastern Han Dynasty. Another item that we found was such a pottery pot. And that pottery helped us to further identify the years of this tomb and the statues, and we believe it was around the year AC 158. Okay, based on what you introduced, some people suspect that those two statues were left behind by the thieves later on, but you told us that based on the other items with the clear years printed, we could basically judge that the two sculptures must be from the end of Eastern Han Dynasty. Exactly. And those two gold-plated bronze statues had some special features typical of the Eastern Han Dynasty. And we will talk about that later when we compare with the other items. Now let's move in and have a close look of those two treasures. This one is called the gold-plated bronze Wuzun Buddha. Wuzun means 5 different Buddhas. It was put vertically. This item must used to be put on the, for example, the niche. And it looks quite similar, like Mathura Buddha. You just mentioned that this statue is composed of 5 Buddha images. Maybe it's not clear from our camera about the size of this statue, but as you can see from the glass wall, it's 15.8 centimeters high and 6.4 centimeters wide. So it's basically the size of our palm, and it's very portable. So this is one of the 2 gold-plated bronze statues, and it copies from the Mathura Buddha. And another statue is put over here. It's very typical of Gandhara. You could see that the Buddha is wearing the cassock with clear patterns on the cassock. And the left hand is already broken, and the right hand goes down, picking up the corner of the cassock. And also the feet were standing on top of a foundation. So that's very typical of the Gandhara. Let's move behind it. As we saw in the beginning, that first structure of Gandhara Buddha had a round-shaped plate behind it representing the light. But this one does not. And also, on the back of it, it's hollow. I believe that must be because this Buddha statue used to be adhered to something behind it, but that something has been lost. So this Buddha is judged to be the one Buddha statue for people to pay tribute to. This one is very small. It's only 10.5 centimeters in size. When we unearthed it, we thought about the origin of this Buddha statue. Since it's very small, possibly it was the business people or the monks carrying this Buddha statue. But was it imported or was it independently made locally? And we did some scientific analysis, and it was made of bronze lead, and that's quite the same with the other bronze wares in the Central Plain area. We have always been using those materials. And as to the manufacturing methodology, they also use the China clay to make this statue. And such a clay-made statue manufacturing was also mature in Central Plain area. The other bronze wares in Gandhara used to be made of the red-colored bronze, that is the copper, but ours is bronze, looking different. And they made those copper statues from the methodology of lost wax process, and that's different from this one. So based on those analyses, we believe this bronze ware must be made locally in China. And as to the image, this image came from the Gandhara Buddha. Maybe the manufacturer has seen Gandhara image before. But undoubtedly, as to the manufacturing of this Buddha, it was made locally in China. You just talked about the figure and the composition of this bronzeware, which were taken as the proof of its independent manufacturing. We copied the image from elsewhere, but we made it locally. If we look closely on the head, and as to the cassock, there was something different from the usual Buddhas of Gandhara. Was it because of the lack of techniques in Central Plain area, or was it intentionally changed? This Buddha was the earliest one, maybe in the end of the 2nd century AC. And Buddha has been introduced to China for a very short time period. That's why this Buddha had some special features of the early days. And in those years, people had very limited understanding of Buddha because of the limited number of samples, so they look quite original. And there are some lagging behind in terms of the processes and the techniques, if we look at the details. Of course, this one cannot rival against those Buddha statues made later on. But just because of that, it underlines the early years of its making. It proves the time period of its making, maybe a little bit later when the Gandhara Buddha was introduced into China. Yes. Compared to the other available Buddha statues of Gandhara, we've done some comparisons. And as you can see on this board, there are some Matula Buddhas and Gandhara Buddhas. They look very conspicuous. If we look at the gesture of the hand and the body, they are quite similar. But those were coming from the original place of Gandhara Buddha, and they could show a lot of details. And if we look at the look of them, they are quite similar to the first gold-plated bronze statue we just saw before, composed of 5 different Buddhas. Why do we believe that our Buddha is Gandhara? For example, we look at the patterns of the cassock. It's quite similar to those pictures, and also we can judge from their feet, their gestures of the hand, and also their eyes. For Gandhara Buddha, one special characteristic is usually the Gandhara Buddha looks down, and our unearthed statue was indeed looking down. This one statue image was from the Pakistani museum, and later on we're going to talk to a reporter from Pakistan to have more detailed looks about this statue. Now let's move on to the other statues made in later years. For example, this one, the AC 338. It's from the 16 Kingdoms period. And that's about 200 years time difference from the two earliest gold-plated bronze statues, and they look very different. So after 200 years, the technique of making Buddha statues made great progress. And a lot of aesthetics features typical of the Central Plain area were added into the making. So, based on the artistic style and also the typology of those images, we could assume that those two statues must be from the Eastern Han Dynasty. They were also the earliest, and it's very valuable. In the end of Eastern Han Dynasty, particularly in the downstream and midstream of Yangtze River, a lot of such Buddha statues were seen, and some of the decorations were in the shape of Buddhas before, but they were not taken as an independent object of respect. They were only taken as decorations on something else. But for the Buddha statues to be respected alone, as a standalone artistic work, it was in the Eastern Han Dynasty. And in the midstream and downstream of Yangtze River, a lot of Buddha statues were found. But those statues of Buddhas were mostly found on the other articles. Independent statues of Buddhas were never seen. So that's quite a gap. Why? As I said, the two statues had their origins from the Gandhara area in Pakistan. Right now, those two unearthed Buddha statues filling the gap. From Eastern Han Dynasty, the Silk Road was already built, so along the corridor to Chang'an City and Luoyang City, where the Baima Temple was built, and which was the central area for Buddhism in Han dynasties, and then down towards Jiangsu province. That was the pathway of the transportation of Buddhism. The emperor of Ming in Han Dynasty encouraged the introduction of the manufacturing of Buddha statues to the Yangtze River areas. So the statues firstly came from the downstream of Yangtze River and then moved to the midstream and upstream. But I have to emphasize again, those Buddhist sculptures or decorations were not independently respected. But our unearthed two gold-plated bronze statues really fill in the gap because they were independently used as the objects of respect. In the origin of Buddhism and in Central Plain area, the Buddhist sculptures were simultaneously found, and they look quite similar. That means China was very open to Buddhism in the early days. Very soon, Buddha sculptures were already welcomed in the Han Dynasty, and they became very popular very quickly. That testifies the Silk Road's role in terms of a civilizational exchange. Thank you, Mr. Li, for introducing so much. We learn about the pathway of the transportation of Buddhist sculptures, and you were part of the excavation, and you knew that those two might be the earliest Buddhist sculptures. Were you shocked? Of course. It took my breath away, and we were very careful in giving suspicions. We need evidence to make such a decision. So we did a long time of investigation and researches to come to that conclusion. Thank you again, Mr. Li, for the introduction. Next, we have introduced another expert in archaeology of Buddha sculptures. Let's welcome Professor Ran from the Northwestern University. Hello, Professor Ran. Hello, everyone. I am Ranwan Li. Could you please briefly introduce the significance of those two early discovered gold-plated bronze statues of Buddhas? Those two statues unearthed from the Eastern Han Dynasty were different from the other images of Buddhas in Eastern Han Dynasty along the Yangtze River. Why? Because, as has been mentioned by Mr. Li, those two sculptures were finally standalone sculptures to be respected. But the majority of those images of Buddha sculptures in Eastern Han dynasties were like the added decorations on the other articles. That's the biggest difference. In terms of archaeology, those two sculptures were independent articles. This reflects that our Buddhism respect habits have changed. And also, what are the special features of the outlooks of those two sculptures, Mr. Ran? First of all, they are made of gold and bronze. And we adhere to the traditional bronzeware manufacturing method. As to the look of it, they look exactly the same as the Gandhara, with the cassock, and even the style of the cassock was similar to that of Gandhara. Even though the right hand is already broken, so we cannot see clearly, but they were barefoot, with no shoes on. If we look at the face, the countenance, and the Buddha images have sharp chins. That is also another feature of Gandhara Buddha. That's why we make that decision. Although the statues were not very well preserved, but judging from the wearings, for example, the cassock, and the gestures, we believe that they also copy from the Mathura style. So, for the two of them, one represents Mathura, one represents Gandhara. And they were locally made. Those two Buddhas were representative of India Buddhism and Pakistani Buddhism. Those two Buddhas were very popular in Central Asian places before. And Professor, you just mentioned about the two different images, but how were those two Buddhist images introduced to China? Through the Silk Road? Of course, now the Silk Road is extended to cover a wider areas. But generally, the so-called Silk Road refers to the pathway blazed by Mr. Zhang Qian. This Silk Road connects between the different regions and countries as a means of transportation. Through the Silk Road, the cultural exchanges between the West and the East were more frequent. Of course, for such exchanges, they are not just about the transactions of silk. It covers economical, religious, cultural, and people-to-people exchange, even the migration of people and the transfer of technologies. As to the manufacturing technique of Buddha sculptures, is one of the contents of such transportation. Obviously, those Buddha sculptures have been found in the Eastern Han area in the city of Chang'an. And we could say definitely that those sculptures must have been introduced to China through the Silk Road established by Zhang Qian. And from some perspective, it proves that on that Silk Road, not only economical transaction happened, such culture exchange was existent. What about the role of the Silk Road in terms of cultural exchange? As to physical exchange, of course, Silk Road played its role, but as to cultural exchange, it requires open-mindedness and tolerance in order to take in the other culture. The Buddhism culture and the Buddhist sculptures were introduced to Central Plain area. That was a proof of open-mindedness of people back then. They were very inclusive towards the outside culture. Thank you. So, could the introduction of Buddhism prove that the Central Plain area's culture was very inclusive of culture from elsewhere? Of course. The image of Buddha sculptures is a direct proof. It's very vivid. And we learn with just a glimpse of it that this is Buddhism from elsewhere. It's visually shocking. With such a visual shock, we know instantly that this is a foreign culture and a foreign art. Why is it here? Why could it be transported from so far away to the Central Plain area? Obviously, it was because of our inclusiveness and our mentality. Of course, for us to take in the foreign culture, such culture might be turned to have more Chinese flavor. For example, there are many images of the female figures flying into the sky in the Tang Dynasty in the paintings, and that figure was also seen to be integrated with Buddhism. So if we put them together and put them into perspective, we could see that we were inclusive, but at the same time, we have been improving the Buddhist arts and culture with more Chinese flavors. That's very significant. Thank you, Professor Ran. See you next time. And just now, according to Professor Ran, we learned a lot. First of all, those two statues were copied from Central Asia, but they were locally made. Particularly, they followed the styles of Mathura and Gandhara, and they were introduced through Silk Road to the Central Plain area to further prove the tolerance of our culture. And we saw a picture of a sculpture from Pakistan. Now let's talk with our Pakistani reporter.
From Xi'an TV. Now I am standing inside the gallery of Lahore Museum, which is called Gandhara Gallery. Lahore Museum is one of the ancient museum in Lahore, and it is also called the Central Museums of Subcontinent. It is situated in on a mall road of Lahore, which is also called the heart of Lahore. And right now we are going to talk about the Gandhara Buddhas. So we have right now Mr. Ehtisham Aziz with us to talk about it, and they will guide us about and detail us about the different Buddhas, especially the Gandhara Buddha and the starving Buddha. So let's talk with Mr. Ehtisham Aziz, who is the curator of this gallery. Moreover, sir, I want to know that we have listened and that this is the second biggest art collection of Buddhism in Pakistan. So what do you want to say about it?
Yes, you're right. This is the second Buddhist collection as well as its quantity is concerned. The first biggest collection is in Peshawar Museum. They have the largest collection of Gandhara art. But I must say here that as well as its characteristics are concerned, or the whole chronological order is concerned, we have the biggest collection, because the collection of Lahore Museum related to Gandhara art is the complete one as well as its chronological order is concerned. Well, as well as quantity is concerned, the Peshawar Museum has the largest one and the Lahore Museum has the second largest quantity of Gandhara art. Yes, you're right.
Oh. Okay, coming back for this Buddha again, I want to know that from where this sculptures have carved out, or from which area it has been derived. So would you like to want to tell our viewers?
Yes, actually Gandhara is the name of basically an area. Gandhara was remained a 42nd province of Achaemenian Empire, which was a very great empire. But now the area of Gandhara is an addition in Pakistan, and the areas in Pakistan, just like Islamabad Valley, just like Texla Valley, Peshawar Valley, Dir, Swat, till Chitral, all the area comprises the Gandhara area. And whatever we have discovered from these areas are called Gandhara art. Different sites like Takht Bai, like Nadi, like different sites of Texla, all these material was excavated from the areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, KPK, and the further different sites of Texla and Takht Bai and Nadi. So these were some famous sites from where usually the Buddha's sculptures were found, the stupas were found, and some traces of architectural materials were also found in the areas of KPK.
Okay, sir, at the end I just want to know and why the people of all over the world and especially our viewers from China and different other countries need to come here in the Lahore Museum to visit the different sculptures of Buddhas, and especially the starving Buddha. So what do you want to say about it?
Yeah, first of all I would like to say hello and hi to our Chinese friends, and I must say a very warm welcome from Pakistani side to come in Pakistan for Lahore Museum. It's because Lahore Museum is one of the oldest museum of Pakistan, and the building which we have is a completely colonial period building, and this is the best example of colonial period plus indigenous architecture. So not only its building is concerned, but also these collections, because here in Lahore Museum we are housed with different ancient civilizations of this area, just like Indus Valley civilization, just like Gandhara civilization, just like Buddhist heritage here in Pakistan, Hindu heritage, Jain heritage, Sikh heritage. So we have different levels, different periods, different dynasties, different civilizations scattered in our museums. So I must say, welcome all of you to the Lahore Museum, because here in Lahore Museum you can not only find the best collection of Gandhara art, but furthermore you can also study how the Gandhara art having influence of other cultures. When the Buddhist art shifted to the other areas of the world, what influence they got? What were the main features of Gandhara art and architecture? So what influence Gandhara art got when it shifted to Nepal, when it shifted to Burma, to Thailand, to China and to Korea. So I think Lahore Museum is the best example of the characteristics of Gandhara art, of the foreign influence in Gandhara art, and you can, in a single gallery, in a single museum, you can find much evidences, information and awareness of the evolution of Gandhara art, right from the 2nd century BC till 5th century AD. And furthermore, when Buddhist art was shifted to the other areas of the world, just like I've mentioned, in our Hindu Buddhist Jain gallery, we have a large collection of Buddhist art belong to Nepal, belong to Burma, China, Thailand, like this. So you can see and find a complete evolution of Buddhist art here in Lahore Museum. So
And especially the starving Buddha.
Especially the starving Buddha, because this is the only example which we have.
So this was our brief session in Lahore Museum about the two Buddhas, especially the Gandhara Buddha and the starving Buddha, with Mr. Ehtesham Aziz. So that's all for today. Over to the main studio.
好的，感谢我们的特约记者带我们看到了巴基斯坦
Thank
拉
you
赫尔博
for
物馆精
showing
美的
us
佛像，
the
尤其是看
Lahore
到了这个
Museum
最早的这种
sculptures,
犍罗风格
especially
样式
the
的佛
earliest
像。
Gandhara Buddha sculptures. Yes, indeed, in Lahore Museum, we see the earliest Buddha sculptures from the origin place. They are very beautiful. So we sincerely welcome our viewers to come to our Hanyang Tomb Museum to have a close first-hand experience of the earliest Buddha sculptures. In today's exhibition, we are honored to experience the earliest introduction of Buddha sculptures. And we welcome our viewers to participate in this exhibition yourself. This is the end. Thank you for watching.